Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Wild Yoga Tribe podcast. I'm your host, Lily Allen Duenas. Together, we'll talk about the world of yoga and we'll talk to people from around the world. Before diving into the episode, I wanted to invite you to head on over to my Patreon. It's brand new, newly minted, bright and shiny, and I would love your support. I'm thrilled to be launching this online community space where we can do yoga together, meditate together, and you'll get access to exclusive content. Get ready for some private Zoom Q&As, free printable art, meditation recordings, and more. Follow the link in the bio to get started. Ready to dive in? Let's go. Namaste, family, and welcome back to the Wild Yoga Tribe podcast. Today, I am joined with Roxana. Roxana is a yoga teacher from Romania who was actually trained by Carlos Romero in Bali, who was a previous guest on the Wild Yoga Tribe podcast, episode number 34. But Roxana is here with me today, and she is a yoga teacher and Thai massage therapist who is deeply passionate about somatics and embodiment. And she loves to mix mindfulness with play and to bring yoga into alternative places and spaces. So thank you so much, Roxana, for being with me here today.
Oh, thank you so much, Lily, for having me. It's such a pleasure.
So to kick off our conversation, I'd love to hear about how yoga first came into your life.
I was this sort of very messy teenager, and I used to get bullied a lot because I was very skinny and very tall and had a very curved back. And so my sister actually was the one who took this decision for me to go for yoga. She was like, you have to do something about it. So I went for my first yoga class. And to be honest, I hated it. I was surrounded by these gorgeous women that all seemed to be knowing what they're doing. And I felt completely out of place. I was like, what am I doing here? And also my first time doing yoga, I actually went for an Iyengar class. So that was challenging all that structure with me being the messy teenager. And so I went home and I was like, nope, I'm not going to do this ever again. And my sister said, you know what, just try it one more time. If you don't like it, then you'd never have to go back to it. So I did. And then I went again and I was pretty much mind blown. I remember that even after just one class, I suddenly felt very at ease. Yeah, I had these puzzle pieces that somehow, even if it was just at the beginning, I was getting very curious about it. And I remember experiencing my second Shavasana and having this moment of not knowing what was going on, but just feeling so deeply blissful. So I was like, yeah, I don't know what this is, but I have to go back to it. And I did. I was 17 when I went for my first yoga class. And then it's been a constant through my life, actually, since then.
We have not similar stories, but in a way similar in that we both came to yoga at about 16 or 17. It is amazing to have this kind of constant companion of yoga with you through all of the ups and downs and the growth periods and through change, always having yoga to come back to. It's just been such a vital part of my being.
Yeah, I totally relate to that. I remember when I moved away. So I left Romania when I was 19 and I went to study in England. I was deeply passionate at that time, passionate about fashion. So I studied fashion design. And I remember just leaving all my friends and the emotional support system that I had back home and just finding myself growing into a woman in a new environment, surrounded by just so much newness. And yoga was like that really good friend that you can go back to and it holds you somehow. You just feel held by it. So I just felt really held by my practice. As soon as you open your yoga mat, it doesn't really matter where you are. You just have this like tiny safe space to just return to yourself, to rest. So yeah, I can totally relate to what you're saying.
And I also can relate to that safe space and that little rectangular mat, no matter where you go, having that feeling of home, of coming back to yourself. Because I've also done a lot of traveling and I've lived abroad a lot for many years. And to always be uprooted it's something I enjoy in so many ways. I love being in new places with new people. But without that support system, you're right, to have something that can help you feel unsupported and held has been so important to me, being as flexible and fluid in my journey as I have been so far.
Yeah, mostly when things don't really go as you expected. So for me, for example, when I moved to England, my big dream was to become a fashion designer because I wanted to bring joy. And I realized very early, I was running at the time a vintage blog. I realized very early that I can make people happy through fashion, through creating something. And I really love to use my hands. Like I love painting and like taking, I don't know, like a curtain and transforming it to a dress or something like that. And that was my dream to create. But then finding myself in the fashion industry was not at all what I was expecting. When things don't go so well, it's so important to find the tools that help you stay afloat, right?
Yeah. So what made you want to become a yoga teacher?
I don't think I've ever planned to be a yoga teacher. It was really interesting. During university, I was struggling with a lot of loneliness. I always felt like an outsider, which is great somehow if you're an artist. It's almost like integrated part because you need moments of solitude. But while I was living in England, I was really craving like human touch, human interaction. And I remember literally going for yoga classes just to be surrounded by people. Like I would go to the yoga studio just to get that sense of belonging. And then I moved abroad to the US, actually. I did a fashion placement there. And I was working 14 hours a day in front of the computer. Once again, finding myself in a new place, not really knowing what to do with myself. And that was actually the first time when I started experiencing panic attacks. And once again, I returned to yoga. I found this yoga studio that was actually doing Bikram yoga, which I've never done before. And I would go there and just allow myself that moment to just release all the heaviness that I was feeling. And then I returned once again to England to finish my degree. But unfortunately, the panic attacks kept coming back. And so I went for therapy. And I made the decision that yoga is going to be my remedy. And I was allowing myself to be very vulnerable and to speak about my feelings. And I realized that there were a lot of people around me that were actually experiencing the same thing. I think going through university, it's a period of transition and also developing yourself as an adult. And a lot of people start feeling lost. And so I was always encouraging my friends, look, I'm going for this yoga class. Come along. You're going to feel so much better. And after a while, it was really interesting. It was actually my friends who kept telling me, man, you speak about yoga with so much passion that, like, honestly, you just make me want to do it. You should just become a teacher. And I was like, that actually sounds like an interesting idea. And the journey never really takes you where you expect. It just unfolds if you allow it to. And after working in the US as an intern in fashion, I realized that I was seeking slowness. So in my last year of university, my final project was about mindfulness, about slow living, slow fashion. And once I was finished with it, I actually allowed myself to take a break and to reconsider where I want to go next. Life took me very far. I ended up moving to Qatar and becoming a flight attendant for a year and a half. And going through another stage of like madness and change and travel and not really having any routine. And I went to a complete burnout. I hit the darkest of the dark, basically, and I had to pull myself up. So I quit my job and I allowed myself for a while to just stay with that darkness. I really didn't want it to run away from it. I just told myself that I need to stay with it for as long as I can so that I can see, like, really in depth what's causing me to feel that way, to experience that darkness. yeah, one day I woke up and I decided to go to Bali. I decided to give myself a complete break. And the next day I was on a flight to Bali. And I just remember not having any accommodation sorted out, just reaching the airport, not knowing what's going to happen next. And somebody by chance wrote me like, hey, I have a room for you. And I was like, okay, it's mine. I'm coming. I didn't even have the address or anything, but I said yes to it. And then I just allowed myself to say yes to as many things as possible. I made a membership to the Yoga Barn for a full month. I told myself I'm going to be in Ubud for a month to just restore my energy. And I would take as many classes, as many workshops as possible, just trying everything out. And that's actually how I met my teacher, one of them. I went randomly for a Thai yoga massage workshop. And I fell in love. And the next week I just joined the course. So I actually became a massage therapist before becoming a yoga teacher. I'm going really deep with the story.
I love it. This is beautiful.
So yes, I met Carlos. I had a vague idea of where I wanted to do a yoga teacher, a vague plan of me being in Ubud for a month, then traveling through Southeast Asia, ending up in Thailand where I was going to join a training in a healing center. But after meeting Carlos, every plan that I made was like literally falling apart because, sometimes you think you want something, but then you get what you need. Sometimes you don't really know what you need until it's there in front of you. And that's literally what happened. Like when I first experienced Thai yoga massage, it really felt like I reached home. Like I never did that before. I was never passionate about massage. And I found myself in this beautiful sacred dance, and I was stunned. And the same thing happened again. I was like, I don't know what this is, but I need to follow my gut. So I joined Carlos, and then I dropped all my other plans. And I knew that Carlos was going to have a yoga teacher training together with my other teacher, who's absolutely incredible, Daniela Garzarios, or Daniela Mandala, as she's known. And so I hopped in. I was like, I don't know what's going to happen next. I just know that you are my teacher and this is what I'm meant to be doing. I guess these are the little steps that got me to becoming a yoga teacher, or at least taking my training. The rest was surprisingly natural because I was actually always scared of speaking in public or like even placing myself in front of a crowd. And teaching yoga, it's been completely different. Yeah, it's interesting how teaching yoga with whatever you do with so much joy, and once you experience the benefits of it and you just believe so much in them, then it's just really easy and really enjoyable to share that. And you want to be able to touch as many people as you can with that. So that's literally what happened. I found what I needed, and I realized that a lot of other people probably need it too. So why not share it?
Yeah, there's so much to be celebrated and feel joyful about the act of sharing. I know when we have something for ourselves, it just is wonderful. But when we're able to share it, it just expounds the joy and the possibility and our growth as well. When we teach, we grow. And I love how you said that you didn't know what you needed, but it came to you anyway. And there's a quote by the Dalai Lama that I always turn to that is, sometimes not getting what you want is a wonderful stroke of good luck. And I'm like, that is such a good point, because it's not always meant for us, even though we think it is. And to not, just clutch so tightly to that idea of, I have to do this or I need to do that, just to let things unfold as they're meant for you is beautiful. And I'm so grateful that you've been able to live that. And I know, Roxana, you also opened a yoga studio in Romania, and then you closed it. And because you mentioned to me before this conversation, or when we were previously chatting, you mentioned that it was not what you expected, or it took away some of your freedom. So could you tell us a little bit more about what that was like to open a yoga studio in Romania, and then also what it was like to make the decision to close it?
Yeah, it was a beautiful experience, actually. It was very meaningful. So what happened was like this. I was collaborating with a few yoga studios. But one of the things that I experienced actually all over the world before meeting my teachers, because that's actually how I ended up loving so much what they do and appreciating their work. So what I was experiencing in a lot of yoga studios was that I would walk in and I would say hi. And not very often people would open up and reply. So they wouldn't even say hi back. And it would just be us, individual, with our yoga mats, and yet practicing together in a room. What I loved about Carlos and Daniela's way of sharing is that they really know how to create an experience and to make everybody feel like part of a family. And I felt like when I returned to Romania, that's something that is really missing there. The sense of community and the family. People tend to be very individual. So I wanted to change that. I wanted to create a community where people would allow themselves to open up and to come to this place. I didn't even call it a yoga studio, actually. It was just like, it felt like a home. But I wasn't planning to open a yoga studio at all. I was collaborating with a yoga studio that was closing down due to the pandemic. And we were searching for a new location. And I decided to help out and find this new location and went to check out a few places. And then I found myself walking in this incredible place into an attic loft. And since I was studying fashion, actually, my dream was to one day have a concept store that brings together different artists, designers, different crafts. And I walked into this space and I was like, wow, this is everything that I envisioned. And so I messaged my collaborator and I was like, I found this incredible place. We have to rent it out. And he was like, no, I don't think so. This is really not the moment for me. And so what happened was that I couldn't stop thinking about it. I was like, no, this is it. I feel it. I really feel it. This is it. So then once again, my sister, who's my biggest supporter, I guess, she said, just do it. Just get over your fear and just do it. You really got this. What I did was that the next day I signed the papers and I decided to have a trial to see how it would be to own a studio. And I gathered my community and I was like, look, I know we're coming out from a very difficult time with the pandemic, but we've been uplifting each other throughout this time. And I think we can create something very beautiful. So the place that I envisioned started taking a beautiful form. We had this loft that felt like a home. I would make the craziest little events, teaching yoga, practicing yoga, and then sharing our favorite desserts or like meeting up for yoga and tarot. It became such a ritual. Like we would meet up and share a cup of tea and then practice yoga and then share stories afterwards. And I realized that I managed to create what I was dreaming of, which was that sense of community. I realized a long time ago that community was present in my life when I was the happiest. And it was beautiful to be able to gift that to others. So what happened was that when you're a yoga teacher, you have 10 jobs in one, which is amazing. I think, like for me, the way that I see being a yoga teacher, I think we're composers of experiences. For me, teaching yoga is literally creating an experience, which can be very transformative for some people. It can be even life-changing, like it was for me when I was a teenager. And I realized that, owning a yoga studio was, like having 10 jobs at the same time and taking a little bit of the joy of sharing. Because, like, one of my mottos is, doesn't matter what you do, but you should always give your best. I read this thing when I was very young. When people ask you, what do you do? Your answer should be, I do my best. So it doesn't matter how small your task is, you're just doing your best. So I tried to apply that to everything, but it was becoming very, very difficult to offer that moment of full presence in massages and also teaching 7 classes of yoga for my studio and also teaching for other studios and promoting all the classes and maintaining that level of presence and that spirit of community and joy, and realize that sometimes you have to make a step back and find that sort of like humbleness. Like I was a bit scared that if I step back, then I'm gonna feel like a failure. But actually, it was one of the most beautiful experiences to make that step back and realize that for 3 months only, we created something that was a dream. And then the ending was really beautiful because I felt my community so close to me and so willing to go wherever next the destination would be. So it was very freeing in a way, just allowing that flow to happen instead of the resistance, because I feel like it's the same with healing. Healing comes through flow, not through resistance. And I wanted to be able to be myself in a state of flow so that I can support others in finding their own flow.
Absolutely. You're right that being a yoga teacher is doing 10 things at once, and to own a studio on top of that with all of the other accounting and management of people and schedules and promotions, like it does sound enormous. And something that also you said that really stuck with me, Roxana, before was you said that embodiment is empowerment. I would love to ask you to speak more on that.
Yeah, that's probably one of the biggest lessons from yoga, actually. My yoga teacher, Daniela, she's very passionate about embodiment. She teaches also mandala yoga, and her flows are very creative. When I actually entered the journey of the yoga teacher training with her, she was actually the main teacher. It was an experience that I never had before. It was so sensorial. Everything was taken in consideration. The music, the senses, right? The sounds, just everything. And I've never experienced that in yoga before. And I don't think I've even heard the word embodiment before my yoga teacher training, because probably in the last year it has become more popular. But before, like, I remember I started yoga when I was 17 and I went for so many types of yoga. I started with Iyengar, then I did Dhru yoga, Bikram yoga, aerial, acro yoga, hatha, vinyasa, all of them. But I never came across embodiment. And when I met Daniela, I found so much freedom in movement that I've never experienced before. Like, yoga just suddenly became this beautiful playground, and I became so curious, playing with the boundaries of form and exploring, and also learning to tap into my sensuality. I think for many years I wasn't so connected to my sensuality, and I was taught that it's something that I should be ashamed of as a woman, or I should keep in a little box. And it was so beautiful to learn to experience this intimacy with myself, where movement had no boundaries, and you could, everywhere around you, it's your altar, and you're just like bowing in gratitude to everything that surrounds you, and feeling deeply in your body, in your bones, in your muscles. So for me, experiencing that in Bali with Daniela and with Carlos both brought me a sense of empowerment like I never had before. Actually, like, if I was to compare the teenager, I had scoliosis problems growing up, and then the young woman in Bali, if they would be together one next to the other, it would probably look like we were completely different people. Yeah, I felt this wave almost of freedom, of creativity, of empowerment. And that's literally what I'm focusing my teaching on. So I teach vinyasa flows, and they're very focused on the experience is in turning your practice into a process. So turning the practice into a process, to me, has brought a lot of tenderness, a lot of connection. And so I try to inspire that in others, to just explore their body and try to go beyond what I'm teaching them. So I always tell them that I'm just a facilitator, but they are actually their own teachers, because they know exactly what they need, where they need it, when they need it. So bringing this sense of like awareness into the body and then becoming very curious and very playful around it. What could be more empowering than that?
Good question. What could be more empowering than that? But what you said, it's just, Roxana, how you said, turn your practice into a process. That really resonated with me. That really made my ears perk up. And I hadn't heard that before, how it is a practice to show up every day. But when you turn it into a process, it feels also more almost like a story, like a beginning, a middle, an end, something that's continuous at the same time. Is that how kind of you interpret those words?
That's very interesting. With yoga these days, and also the Western type of yoga, I feel like a lot of times people look for inspiration, but also have this super high standards. Like everything we see is so curated. And what I really like about yoga is that, I don't know, at least for me, yoga is the place where I never question myself. So I think that in yoga, there's no seeking for perfection, and that somehow there's no end to the journey. We just start reaching this summit of, let's call it perfection, when we learn to love ourselves wisely, when we look at our experience through this eyes full of grace, turning the practice into a process. I actually teach this as a metaphor to my community. There's the metaphor of the plant, right? And when you look at the plant, you don't judge it, right? It's not fully blossomed, or it's a bit bent, or you just maybe admire it or see all of this, but you don't judge the plant. But we do that a lot with ourselves. And I try to remind my community often that we are like plants. We need our darkness for the seed to start growing. And then we need to allow time to the plant to start blooming and opening. But the plant also needs light and fertile soil and sun and water, and somebody takes care of that. So we need to be both the gardener and the flower, and that's a full process. So I try to remind my community to be like a plant and to allow themselves to take the practice and step by step daily to turn it into a process.
Thank you so much for telling us more about those words, and about the metaphor. And it's a beautiful one to sit and think about and to reflect on, and to be the gardener and the flower, to be both. It seems like a big responsibility, something that would take a lot of consciousness, as well as, I'm sure, this instinctual, this something from inside that almost has no form and no words for it. But I think you can only really become aware of that or move towards that in silence and in stillness, and in doing these internal processes like yoga asana, meditation, pranayama, anything that would draw you closer to yourself.
Oh yeah, silence is sometimes very loud. I feel like silence is the scary element, because you start hearing yourself, for sure.
So, Roxana, a question I do like to ask every guest is, what is your personal definition of yoga? I know there's a lot of sutras and texts, and you've really done such a beautiful job throughout this conversation to talk about yoga as a playground or yoga as a remedy. And so I would just love to also ask you that question directly and hear what you have to say.
That's really hard to put in words, isn't it? I feel like yoga is my home. It's that safe place where I return to myself, to my sensitivity, to compassion. I also feel like yoga is my mirror. It's the place where I can't escape myself. So on my bad days, I don't really want to look in the mirror. But when I do, gosh, I'm reminded that there's so much beauty there too. Then I see yoga as my friend, the sort of friend that tells you the truth always. Like you have a lifelong friend, and they're gonna look at you and tell you even the things that you don't want to hear. but with so much honesty. And that friend is always there. You can always go back to them and feel safe. Then I see yoga for sure as the biggest playground. It's like yoga gives us this beautiful canvas that we don't really know how it's going to turn out, but there's so many tools and colors of paint that you can play with. There's movement and breath and so many things. And so I love, that's another metaphor actually that I love, where yoga is like a canvas. And actually Daniela, my teacher, says that we are the painting, the painter, the paint, and the painted. It's a beautiful metaphor. And I think yoga is freedom. Yeah. It's like whenever you feel stuck or whenever you feel like you lose yourself and you find yourself. And there's so much freedom to experience that, to allowing yourself that flow, that unfolding.
Thank you so much. I love all of those metaphors. I love all of what you said. You're so poetic in your speech. It's going to be hard for me to choose my favorite quotes from you and things to highlight. But I would love, Roxana, as well, to ask a little bit about yoga in Romania. I'd love to hear more about how it was in the past, how it is now, or where you see it going in the future.
So, yoga in Romania, it has been quite a challenge. I'm not going to deny it. I remember landing back from Bali where I experienced much variety of activities and practices. And coming back to Romania was very interesting because you can be very present and blissful on an island. But in Bucharest, where I'm actually living now, can be quite a triggering place. It was very interesting initially to explore, like, how is yoga seen? I actually remembered some relatives of mine when they found out that I became a yoga teacher. They were very stressed and somehow like worried for me. They were like, oh my God, she might have joined a cult or something. So there's definitely this idea somehow that yoga somehow is related to a cult, because in the past, I think during communism, there has been a story of this guru that was not a real guru, let's say. And I think that history still has a strong impact on how yoga is seen in Romania. At the same time, I feel like the younger generation is very curious, but also very shy. I see that mostly in women. There's a lot of shame about embodiment, actually. And what I was saying, the values that I grew up with. I'm a woman, so I should be quiet and I should stay in a corner and not really be too much or take too much space. And I actually see that a lot every day. So I think what's happening in Romania right now, it's a huge shift into the way that yoga is being seen. And I love it. I love seeing that curiosity, and people are more and more interested into what it can bring to you. Not necessarily on a physical side, but also emotionally. They realize the benefits of it, and they start to make it integrated part of their lives, which is it's really beautiful, because when you go on a holiday destination, when you go to Bali, it's also available. But I love people that consciously are seeking these opportunities to make it happen. So yeah, I would say there's a huge shift. It's still like a new territory in Romania. Yoga feels quite new still in Romania, but there's an increasing interest in it. And it's very exciting, to be honest, very exciting.
Amazing. And for those of our listeners who aren't very familiar with Romania, would you mind sharing with our listeners more about your country?
Of course, Romania. The top things that come to my mind, probably the mountains. The nature is wonderful in Romania. For any outdoor enthusiast, I would totally recommend Romania and checking out the mountains and the delta. And there's so much beauty. And I feel like because maybe Romania is not as touristic or as popular as a destination, it's so easy to find that sort of like untouched beauty. That's one of the things that I really love about Romania. Then, of course, there's many other things. We have beautiful castles and medieval towns. And I would say quite tasty food. I love food, so for any foodies out there, I would recommend trying quite a few things. Yeah, I love how Romania is like a hidden gem, and I teach yoga a lot for expats. And I get very excited when they move to Romania and they're impressed. They're so impressed also by how kind the people are. Romanians are very determined, I would say, and very strong people, but also have this beautiful softness where they're like willing to invite any stranger into their house and share whatever they have there. And that's something that I really appreciate about my country.
Amazing. I actually spent a few weeks in Romania in 2010 in the summer. I was in Barlad volunteering at a children's hospital clinic, and then I was able to take some time and go to Bucharest and some other surrounding castles and mountains. And it is a beautiful country, and you're right, untouched. So Roxana, I'm really grateful for the gift of your time and for being with you. And when I say that, I think you're so eloquent and so wonderful at communicating kind of your energy through your words. So thank you so much for being with me today.
Wow, I just literally got goosebumps. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm super grateful to be able to speak about what I love and to share my very little knowledge, and hopefully make people come to Romania as well and explore the beauty of it and explore the beauty of yoga. And I'm super, super grateful to have had this beautiful talk to you.
Thank you so much. And if anybody who's tuning into this podcast wants to reach out to Roxana, learn more about her, get in touch, or go check out some of her classes in Bucharest, you can find her on Instagram at Hearth Yoga, HEARTHE.YOGA. And I'm going to link that here in the show notes, as well as put it on my website, wildyogatribe.com/yoga in Romania. So thank you once again, Roxana, for being here.
Thank you so much, Lily. This has been amazing, really, such a pleasure.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Wild Yoga Tribe podcast. My conversation with Roxana, a yoga teacher from Romania, was so real and vulnerable as we dove into how yoga can whole you and can be a remedy for that which ails you or that which you struggle against. I hope that this conversation made you delight in how yoga can be a playground and how embodiment is empowerment. If you're looking to tune into a podcast episode that is all about embodiment, play, and turning your practice into a process, then this is the conversation for you. Thank you for listening to the Wild Yoga Tribe podcast. Be well. Thank you for the gift of your attention today. If you feel called, please share this episode with someone who you think could benefit from it. Leaving a review would also be so appreciated. I also hope you can join me online on my website, wildyogatribe.com, or on social media. I would love to get to know you better. I would love to share with you and to hear your thoughts. Send me a DM, send me a note, get in touch. It would be great to hear from you. And as always, be well, dear one, be well.